Good morning. Thank you for coming to this, the first in our... Can you hear me now?
Yeah, even the microphone a little bit towards you. You have to speak directly into the in-house microphone.
Is that better?
Yes, it is.
More? Closer. Closer. Kiss the mic, right?
Here, hang on a second.
That's our church motto.
Oh, really? Okay, is that better?
Guys, try to speak up a little bit because it's...
Okay, we will, all of us who are speaking here will speak up louder.
I got the volume control over here too, so...
Okay, thank you, Casey. This is the first in a series of seminars on the topic of tending to tomorrow. We've called it the Legacy Series, and it's really been an honor to work with a team to pull this together. We came together, I think last September, with a very vague idea, not knowing at all where it was going. And we just brainstormed, because everyone in this group, there was 8 on this team, had someone in their family or a close friend die, and they'd been the one that was responsible for trying to clean up all of the paperwork, all the documents, everything, without a roadmap, without any sense of direction. So we met for six months, and we just kept brainstorming, and finally there started to be a shape that the program took, which is the shape that you see in the red books in front of you. Interestingly, the 8 people did not know each other at all when we started, but I knew they'd all had some kind of loss that they've had to deal with. And trust me, now after 6 months of getting used to saying the word die, dead, we've gotten all pretty close to each other in many ways. So this is a series built on real life experiences. Some of the nitty-gritty you might see in the book, you may say, that has nothing to do with me. But then again, there may be something that you find that very much applies to you. So it's to their credit, not mine, that you have the red books in your hand. We initially started with a series of 3 seminars, and then we found an article that's in the back of your books dealing with something called digital legacy. Digital legacy. We didn't have any idea what that was, but it sounded important, like we should know something about it. And our idea then was we would just put the article in there and hope for the best, that maybe you could make some sense of it. But we knew that there was something important. And I just want to ask you now, how many of you have had some kind of access to Amazon? Well, then you need to pay attention to this article, because when you die, Amazon does not shut down your account. And if you have some kind of a connection, as I do, with a credit card or PayPal, well, just what fun somebody could have accessing all of our accounts. So that's why digital access is really important. And to our great surprise, Lee Harrington, who's a member of this church, approached us and said, would you like to have a little presentation about that? And it was like, yes, of course. So he asked us to add another session, and that will be, again, that's on your list, right in the beginning of your book, March 27th. It'll be Sunday, right after church. It won't be a Saturday program. But I think that one will be of interest to all of us, because most of us have no idea how to shut down a Facebook account or anything else so that no one can ever steal our identity after we die. I want to turn the program over to Julie and Lori, 2 of our team members. But I want to tell you who the whole team was. Julie Del Giorno in the front. Don Kydell, who's not able to be here today. Pat Sargent, who's in the back. She's at the registration table, I think. Pam Stiers, Colleen Tracy, and Lori Walker. and Betty Mann. I had your name down and I just didn't type it right. And Betty Mann. So all of us have had experiences, yes, Betty's in the back, that we shared, big things, little things. All of it was valuable. And hopefully what you will find in these next 3 weeks will be valuable to you as well. But before I turn the microphone over to Lori and Julie, I just want to have a big thank you for Casey Cochran over here for coming in on a Saturday to do the sound system, because we had the whole system figured, and then it was like, how do we do the sound? Not through me. And so he has very generously been available and helped us work out the trickiness of having a speaker here and then having 3 speakers over there. So we're going to take a short break so he can set up the, oh, no, not yet. Lori and Julie are going to come forward and talk about the Red Books.
Good morning. Are we good on the mic? Yes. I have a big, loud mouth usually, so I don't worry about mics. But so, welcome. Marge gave you a little bit of a preview as how we got this together, and I'm going to tell you why this whole thing started. So when I first met Marge on my "Am I going to join this church?" meeting. Marge asked me a lot of very pointed and questions to ask me about who I was, maybe to figure out if she wanted me to be part of this church or not. I don't know, but it came up that what I've been doing for the last 6 months was I lost my husband, and I lost my sister-in-law, and I lost my stepmother, and I lost my father, and so I have been working on figuring out their estates. And what do you do? And it had been a lot. And then the effect that it had on me. And I explained to her that my friend Lori had said, you have all this information, you really need to share it. And I told Marge, I said, I kind of feel that is a necessary thing. And Marge says, well, we could have a seminar. Would you help? And so, man, she had me hooked in right away. I wasn't even a member yet, but I was going to be doing this. So, which I'm very happy to have been participating. And so, I found out a lot of this on my own. Like Marge said, we all kind of did it as we found out. I learned more also from the team members, things that I didn't have to deal with. And that's really been the beauty of all of this, is that everyone has a different story. Everyone has a different situation. And there's lots of different ways that you can handle it. Everyone that leaves here is going to go back and do their own thing. What we hope is that you all do something with the information, because we really feel that it's going to be beneficial, not only for you now, but for the people that will help out. And Lori is going to explain a little bit more about the Red Book.
Hi, good morning. Some of you may have remembered me saying something about my dad talking to me at an early age. I was in my early teens, and he sat me down and he said, okay, gave me a piece of paper. This is all the people, these are the accounts, these are the phone numbers, addresses, the banks, and this is what your mom and I want to have done after we die. And I'm going, la, 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 because I just didn't, it was difficult. It was a difficult conversation, especially when I was young. He did that with me. We had this conversation probably every 2 or 3 years. As life events changed, as we moved, as accounts changed, he made sure to update all of that information with me. And as I got older, I so appreciated that. And now, having moved my mom, I realize that I kind of have to revisit this with her. All these places, you know, the memory care facility that she's in has wanted all of her documents, and I had to go find them. Also made me realize that you're never too old to have this conversation with yourself. And I need to find my paperwork too and start pulling this together. So this is coming from, you know, a very personal place. In my work, I have always said, in case I get hit by a bus, this is where this file is. This is where this information is. And this is part of this series that I want to stress. This is not, this is definitely about having you pull your information together for end of life, but you can be incapacitated at any time. You can be hospitalized with COVID. You could be, things have changed so rapidly. You need to start putting this information together. For your peace of mind, but also for your loved ones or whoever's going to be able to step in. I found a book called In Case You Get Hit by a Bus. And of course I had to buy it. It is eye-opening because it's things that I never thought about. Julie and Marge have mentioned the digital footprint. Yes, your bank account may be closed, Amazon is still open, and people can go in and get your identity. May not be able to get that money, but can set something up. Digital footprint will outlive all of us. So that's an important conversation to have, an important part of it, and that's in here as well. But one of the things that I came across that I thought was very helpful is like, how do you get all the information together? What kind of information do you need? And then how do you store it? A locked box is not going to be helpful if you're dead. A safe deposit box is not going to be helpful as well. You need to have something to some place where you can keep everything and then let your loved ones know where that is. For many of us, it's a file folder in a drawer somewhere, might be a box somewhere, but what we came across is your red notebook. Everybody has notebooks, very few of us have red ones, so it's going to stand out. You can tell people this is the red notebook. Look for the red notebook. In case anything happens to me, look for the red notebook. All of your information is there. If you live in 2 states, there's no sense in having, a notebook for here and then, you can take it back and forth. Of course, you can do whatever is comfortable for you, but you could duplicate your notebook, have a Florida section, have a Michigan section or whatever, so that you've got it in both households. We also came across an idea of having the contact information in case you find this in your purse, in your wallet, in your luggage. Here's the, look for the red notebook. In case of an emergency, contact this person, look for the red notebook. It just helps keep your information all together. It's portable. It's easy to identify. It's portable. And if we have to evacuate because of a hurricane or because of a fire or some other reason, it's easy. Grab and go. All of your information is right there. I think that it's a way to help you keep up to date too. My bank is SunTrust. All of my paperwork says SunTrust. SunTrust doesn't exist anymore. It's called Truist. How is somebody going to know, that SunTrust, they're going to be looking everywhere for SunTrust? You need to keep the notebook updated, and this is what's beautiful about being able to keep this updated. How you choose to do it, of course, is up to you, but that's the idea of the red notebook, leaving a legacy for your peace of mind, but also being able to be thoughtful and helpful for the people who have to take care of you in case you're hospitalized or if you die. So we want you to ask questions as we go through, but I'm going to turn it back over to Julie so she can go into the red notebook in a little more detail. Thank you.
All right, so everybody's got their book? We're just going to tell you a little bit about why you have all this stuff in here. So in the front cover, you've got, what about these? So this was done so that you can actually take notes. You can start now, take it home. This is your homework assignment, maybe. But these are things, this is to get you started. These are things to start you thinking that you are going to put together. And so feel free, these are yours. The reason we did them up front so that it's easy for you to grab and you can start writing down things today. Then you got a pen, you got clips in here, all things that just make it a little bit easier so you really kind of have a starter kit. Your agenda is in the very beginning, just as a reminder of what all is going to go on in these sessions. And then the documents for the Red Book. There are multiple lists in here. Some of them are a little bit, they duplicate some of the same information. That's just how important this information is, okay? So I'm going to let you read this on your own. I did say Red Book, okay? Again, we can't emphasize enough. Again, everybody's going to decide how they want to do it. But if you want to just have a conversation with whoever is going to be in charge of your stuff, you can say, it's all in the Red Book. They might not want to talk to you about it any further than that, but then they're going to see it's going to be real easy for them to go through this. Your personal contacts, you're going to want to make a list of who those people should be, not just the person who's going to be in charge, but, you know, what pastor needs to be, you know, contacted. How about somebody in your clubs that you attend that would want to know that you're in the hospital? Who's going to let us know that we want to pray for you, okay, in case you're in the hospital, all right? Those kinds of things. So all of this is all to get you thinking about what kind of information you're going to be pulling together. A list of, how about your bills, okay? Who's going to take care of your bills? Oh, I have those all set up on my account. They all get deducted. Let me tell you, if somebody calls and says, and tells your bank and turns in the death certificate, okay, that account is now closed, okay? So none of those things will continue to be, you know, paid from that account. These are all things you want to be thinking about. And again, another list of categories of documents that you want to start putting together. This is called the legacy drawer. Like Lori said, maybe somebody wants to put this in a drawer. They don't want a Red Book sitting out. But these are, again, lists of things to help you think about the documents that you want to be finding. A real fast, if you're a person that doesn't like to read and all of this is too much info, here's a real quick list for you. The documents that you want to find. Where is the title to the car? Where is the title to the house? How about that life insurance policy? Is it still valid? Did we let that cease? I found 4 life insurance policies for my dad that some of them had just, you know, were no longer valid that I called. But, you know, it took time for me to figure that out, to find all the documents, to find the right number, because some of them were 40 years old, okay? And then a conversation here, a little bit of a write-up that's going to be more information from our next speakers. You got blank paper in here for you to take notes. You've also got a list back here that says possible purchases. These are things that if a person is going to be the executor, you want to be thinking about. These are some of the things that they may need. Helpful things that will come in handy. Yep, they may want to have you may need to have a printer or access to and think about scanning documents. And then the write-up that Marge mentioned about the digital planning. That is, hopefully, Lee's going to make this a lot easier than these pages indicate, because this is craziness. Yeah, yeah. And then these last ones, these you can make as your dividers. Like I have 5 dividers in mine. One is financial, one is my contacts, one is all of my bills, one is my medical information. So we tried to give you everything to get you started. Again, this is your starter kit. And we hope that you're able to use this, and if you have any suggestions or anything you want to add to it once you get started, let us know and we can share that with everyone. Okay? Lori, and we're going to wrap it up. Lori's going to just give you a little bit of a background on the next few weeks.
I grabbed Julie's red notebook because I'm impressed. She has on the spine, you know, that it's her red notebook, but even more importantly, when it was updated. And I can't stress that enough to keep things updated. Thank you. So we are very pleased to have some special guests with us today that will help us get started with that conversation. Some conversations, like I said, are a little more difficult than others. Maybe you've tried to talk to family, or maybe you just haven't gotten there yet. So I'm pleased that we have Barb, Nan, and Carl here to talk with us. Most of us have wills already, but let me tell you, a will isn't going to help you necessarily, and so you need to have this other information. Granted, Florida laws and advanced directives and stuff in Florida may not apply to your second home state. So we do have an attorney who will be here next week to talk about some of these legal issues and to help you, again, use that as a jumping off point. The following Saturday on the 19th, we have what we call the final chapter. We'll have somebody from hospice come in to talk, as well as Moss Feaster, just to give you ideas. If you have not, excuse me, made final plans, this again is a jumping off point. Lee came up to us, excuse me, in one of the sign-up sessions, and he's an attorney, and he said that he has actually been teaching other attorneys about your digital footprint. And it is such a big deal that we are, as Marge said, we're very thankful to have him come in to talk. So this is open to everybody, so I also want to make sure you know that you can ask questions. Thank you. That you can ask questions. We'll be keeping records of questions. There's more handouts, there's more information, and again, if you have things that you'd like to offer too, we'd be happy with that. So at this time, I'd like to turn our conversation over to Barb, Carl, and Nan, and talk about the conversation. Okay? Give us a couple minutes so we can get the microphones switched over, and I can get the frog out of my throat. Thank you very much. Thanks, Marge.
In the middle? Monkey?
Rose between two thorns.
Here we go.
Okay, so one of these mics is for online, one's for this speaker right here. And that's where the mics are. Those little things right there. Bring it up pretty good, so,
You just need to hold it.
yeah, you kind of have to hold it like, fairly close to you. I'll, monitor the sound and see, I'll let you know if you need to make any adjustments.
Good morning, one and all. Can you hear me well? Yes. All right. It is so wonderful to be a part of this. I'm grateful to this team that has drawn us together for this very important topic. And we were invited to talk about having the conversation. And we decided that we, in our lead up to this, that we would just have a conversation up here, and you're going to get to watch us. And then afterwards, we're going to have a time, if you have any questions for us, we'll answer them our best ability to do so. So we're supposed to speak, and we will, from our personal pastoral experiences. How many years together?
Around 125, I figure.
125.
That means these guys are really old, because I've only been in my little town.
She's right.
She's right.
She's right.
So maybe between the three of us, we'll come up with something that's valuable to some of you, and we hope that is true. I thought this is also how appropriate, it hadn't dawned on me before, earlier in our conversations last month even, that we're in the season of Lent. And assumedly, I don't know if Mike did that this year, but what does he remind us every Ash Wednesday? From space dust you have come, and to space dust you're going to return. So how many of you are going to die? Does anybody? I only got about half of you to raise your hand. Somebody else has got some secrets we don't know about. But I think, the whole issue for us during Lent is the examination of ourselves and how we are in taking a loving care of ourselves, as well as how are we deepening our experience of how we understand God to be. And certainly that has to do with the sense of our calling and ministry as Christ's presence to our family and to our church. And we want to connect with that well, and even maybe hopefully more deeply. And I think this is the kind of a presentation in a series workshop that helps us in that process. So we're going to start by introducing ourselves and talk just briefly about giving a biographical sketch of our history and over those 100 and how many years? I can't get over this.
Well, we figured 40, and 20.
10.
She is younger than us.
My name is Nan Dahlberg. I'm a retired UCC clergy. Served most of my pastoral ministry in Pennsylvania. I retired from a UCC church, the only UCC church in Tallahassee. And I retired 3.5 years ago. Seems like forever ago, but it was only 3.5 years ago. Moved down here to Dunedin, and I spend the other half of my time in Canada. But more recently, I had a home in New Jersey, and I'm going to get into that because my story is about my stepsister who lived in New Jersey, where I had a home also, and she was diagnosed with ALS. And I think that's why I was asked, as Marge knows this story, and I think that's why she asked me to be part of this, was dealing with Donna's ALS. So I'll get into that when the time comes.
Okay.
Thank you. So I started late in life into ministry, went into seminary in 2002, became ordained in 2008, and pastored a small church in Montague, Massachusetts. Has anybody heard of Montague, Massachusetts? Oh, right. And it was lovely, but I was only able to be there for 9 years because I was coming down here more and more frequently. My mom was sick. My mom and dad were living here, and my mom was sick. Together as a family, we decided that my dad would buy a house and my sister would move in with them and be the caretaker. And as I said, I was coming down frequently to give her a break in that. And the day after I retired in 2017, my sister got diagnosed with lung cancer. And she's still battling. She did really well, and right now she's having a hard time. So I had only my 9 years in pastoring up in Massachusetts. And I guess that's my story.
My name's Carl Vomigan. I was ordained in 1975 and served churches of different sizes and locales around the country. Started out in western Kentucky, in Owensboro, Kentucky. And then I did my doctoral studies up at Colgate Rochester Divinity Schools in Rochester, New York, and there served a congregation, kind of farm suburbia. and was there for 12 years, and then we moved to Baltimore, and I served there in a suburban horse area north of Baltimore, beautiful Moncton area, and had a wonderful staff there and worked there, as I said, nearly 12 years as well. And then after that, it's interesting connecting with your story about somehow the move was related to care for others. That's how we ended up here in Florida. Beth Ann's parents had retired to Florida, what, in 1980 or around there? Yeah. And at the time it was 2000, we decided, and they needed some more assistance in the care down here, even though one sister was living here to carry some of the burden and care for her parents. We intentionally looked to be able to serve a congregation here in Florida. And so I was the pastor of Church on the Bayou in Tarpon Springs for 12 years. I was kind of on a theme of that's how long I stayed in one place, I guess, and then retired in 2014. I think one of the lines that I've stolen from others, of course, and you probably have heard it before, and I always say that life happens while you're making other plans. And I guess you really can say life and death occur while we're making other plans. Because I think in my pastoral ministry, of course, have had to deal with various times in people's lives and when death arrived. In the church I served in Western Kentucky, the most, I think, I hate to say the saddest, but clearly one of the most saddest was a young girl who was playing in the upstairs bedroom. It was an old home, and you know how some of the old homes had big paned windows. She was jumping on the bed, and she went right through the window and fell 2 stories. And you talk about life, death happening while you're making other plans. It was just overwhelming for, of course, the family and for the pastoral staff. And it gets to that place that, we wanted to say that we don't have all the answers, but we've been through and walked with other people through quite a bit, and we're hopefully going to share some things that we think are important and things that have come up in our ministries. We know that with death there is the stages of Kubler-Ross, but it's been expanded and amplified by different people about what we go through during death. Denial, anger, bordering depression, and acceptance. And this is not only for death, but grief too, for the one who remains, has to work through those stages as well. And maybe I can tell a story about denial. I had one member of my congregation in Baltimore who, even when he was in his last days in the hospital, he wasn't going to die. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to hear anything about it. He didn't want any treatments to stop because he wasn't going to die. And that makes it a very difficult place where to be when trying to provide pastoral care. But again, we don't have all the answers to that, but we stay with people, companionship, fellowship, relationship. I think that's a piece that you have somebody to be with and talk with in the midst of that time. We're going to share personal experiences about.
Want to talk about your kids?
You want me to start? Oh, you wanted me to start. Now I'm doing all the talking.
Yeah.
I'm
Tell
gonna,
them about
all
your
right.
kids.
Well, I was going to say the topic of death comes up a lot, and we all know about death and taxes. When I was doing tax preparation just this past week, one of the worst times of the year for me, I said to Beth Ann, copying the title of the book, I said to Beth Ann, because I do the taxes, and I said to her, well, what if I was hit by a bus tomorrow? And the first answer is, there's no buses in this community that you're going to get wrong. I said, well, what if I did? Well, I said, these finances, pulling all this stuff together, it's all different places, and you have to get it to prepare for I get a CPA to do our taxes. And she says, well, if that happens, I'm going to go on one of those dating sites, and I'm going to find somebody who has a degree in financing. And that's a plan. So she has her plan.
Could we get a list of those dating sites in the red book? Yeah, right.
But the real story I'm going to tell, and Lori you acted it out for me perfectly. Because when I was with our children. We have done a lot of planning and have most of our documents in place and in order. And we have them in what's called, you know what a secretary is? Yeah, piece of furniture. So it's a drawer and a couple slots on the top where everything is that they need to get to. Of course, now we're going to have a red book. So I sit down with my daughter and our son, the same experience, trying to tell them, you know, when we were going out of the country, I think that's the time we really started talking about it, thinking, you know, if something happened while we're away, that they would be prepared. So, you know, we got the same thing. You're not gonna die. Well, I said, not tomorrow, but if, you know, if it happens, we want you to know what to do. And so I said, everything's in the secretary. So there was a real reluctance, and I don't think we've not really talked extensively. There's been other physical things that are happening in our lives that have caused the conversation to come up again. But clearly, they know the answer is in the secretary. And now I'm going to have to say in the secretary, including the red book, so that we have those pieces together. So yes, you never know what the reaction is going to be from your children about how they might perceive this and want to be a part of that conversation. But at least you have to initiate it, and we've initiated it more than once. It's not something like it happens just once in your relationship with your kids. If you're fortunate enough to have children that will be in the part of taking care of your details once you do die. I'll stop there.
I've got minutes, that's right. What we talked about early is we don't have the answers. That's what Carl said. And what we realized was that if we had the superpower to convince people to do what they need to do in order to take care of their end times or their death or whatever, if we had that power to do that, we wouldn't be using it on having people plan their funeral. We'd be using it for a lot of other things. Funerals would be low on the list. Stop your addictions. Be faithful. Don't gamble. World peace. Just to name a few. So if Carl is point, I'm counterpoint. He was able to talk with his children, and even though they didn't want to hear it, he had the conversation and they know where to go. My story was having a stepsister, Donna, who in May of 2020 was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 64. Donna is optimistic, a person she's never met a stranger, smiling all the time, intelligent, wonderful person to have in my family. Those are the good things. And then there's the other side of Donna, which is Donna can't make a decision to save her soul. Donna's dishwasher broke in 2018, and to date, she has not replaced it. The reason is Donna's paralyzed by having to make decisions. She's afraid she'll make the wrong one. And so when she was diagnosed with ALS, well, being her closest geographical relative, I went into control mode. Donna, you need to have a will. Donna, have you put other names? Do you have a directive, a medical directive? And Donna would just look at me and shrug and say, I'm not worried about it. Donna, what will happen to you when you can no? And in the ensuing months, Donna lost the ability to speak, and I became her voice. So my point here is that I began to tell Donna that she needed to take control of herself, but what I really meant was, Donna, you need to let me take control of your life. And as a friend of mine who teaches social work at FSU says, help is only helpful when it's helping. And I wasn't helping. And the more I would rate down things that she needed to do and take care of, and don't leave us with this, and please, blah, 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 it eroded my relationship with Donna. Because I became the nagging bitch, and Donna was simply Donna. I don't want to make a decision. So my words to you, that you may have that conversation with your children or with other members of your family, speaking about what you want. I urge you to reconsider trying to talk someone else into what they need to do. The fact of the matter is, we only in this world get one life to live, and that's ours. We don't get to live someone else's. So I had to back away. And Lord knows where Donna is in all of this. I'm in touch with her as a sister. I am not in touch with her as a future executor or anybody else. I've backed away from all of that because it was eroding our relationship. You talked about the 5 stages of grief, and just one other point about that is that someone doesn't need to die in order for you to hit those different markers of grief. And it's not a longitudinal kinds of thing. We're depressed today and angry tomorrow. And then the third day, well, I've accepted it, but now, no, I'm back to anger. When we're all going through all of this right now in something in your life. Have you lost a job, or your best friend isn't speaking to you, or your kids are not where you want them to be? We're all going through those stages all the time. And what was happening between Donna and I was that Donna would get to a place of acceptance where I would be angry. And she would get to a place of depression, and I would be into bartering. And so we were like this, because we were never at the same place at the same time. I was grieving her illness and the loss of her faculties. She was having her own grief. But because I was so centered on my control of Donna, if I could control Donna, I won't have to feel depressed. If I can control Donna, I don't have to feel angry. Wrong. I needed to back away and have my feelings separate from Donna. I'm angry, but not because Donna won't do what I want. I'm angry because Donna's going to die. So there's a lot of psychological underpinnings to all of this, and I know that when Marge asked all of us to do this, she was hoping that we would hand you, or you would be able to write in your red book, this is what you say.
A script.
A script. There ain't no script. And you have to work with the personalities that you are working with, yours as well as everybody else's. So that's about it.
And it's reality that life is messy, and so again, we can plan, and it's important that we do, but there's 1,000 things can get away from our well-devised plans, but that's not a cause not to do it in the first place. You got a story, Sharon?
So I just want to make a comment based on yours. A situation that happens with my sister and I is that my anxiety level is lower when I have a lot of information, and my sister's anxiety level is higher. And so when I came in to help with my sister and her, as she was going into the cancer, getting herself diagnosed and getting treatment, finding a doctor and all that stuff, my method of managing my own situation was driving her up a wall and making her really angry. And my whole purpose of being there was to be a calming presence and be helpful. And I found that my method was not helpful for her, so I had I had to really rely on other things like meditation and walking. I did a lot of walking. And so that's something you may run into also when someone, it's just like you said, every situation is an individual situation. So it's really knowing, or if you don't know ahead of time, assessing how the conversation is affecting the person that you're trying to help, and then trying to move from there. One example, one situation I had with a friend who was dying, he also had, he had MS, I believe, not ALS. And I was a minister at the time, and I was going to visit him. And one day he wanted me to start talking with him about the process of dying and what would happen next. And what it really came down to was he was concerned that he could not ask God for forgiveness for what he was perceiving as his sins or whatever. And he couldn't ask God, he couldn't come to God because he felt guilty because he had not prayed in years. And so he felt he couldn't pray because that would be too hypocritical. And so it opened the opportunity to have a conversation, a sharing about, well, you know, I got to share my view of who God is and how God works in our life. And it opened up a conversation between us. And we had some time to do that. So that was wonderful. Eventually, we ended up having a little ritual, and he was able to pray, and it was a good outcome. The other brief example I have is when my parents, when we bought the house, and my sister and my dad and mom moved into the house together, they initiated the conversation. They said, let's sit down and have a conversation. And we sat around the table, and they talked about their wishes. I knew about the MOLST form, you know, the advanced directives and that kind of thing, so I was able to bring that into the conversation, which I'm sure you're going to learn about that next week. And so it was nice. We knew my mom died 2 years after they moved, and my dad died last year, 2 years later. So we knew most of what we needed to know. However, I think this red book is amazing and wonderful because really when my mom died, it didn't matter so much. My dad knew where the stuff was, and he knew what they had done. And some of those papers you didn't need then because he was still alive. When he died, again, he, like days before his death, when he knew that, okay, this is my final week, he said, okay, girls, come on in here. Yeah. And he went through, you know, so it was, he knew. And he showed us where each thing was, and that was really, really helpful. So, not surprised that this is coming up on the anniversaries. So.
Just play Claire de Lune and you'll see me. My mother played the piano, and that was the one piece that she played over and over again, so, okay, it's already starting to happen. And you know, I never realized how many people use that as background music in so many movies, and it Yeah, it just keeps showing up. So in one way, it's communion with my mother, though, at the time, too. So anytime it evokes it again, it's communion. Yeah. Talking about, one of the things that sparked for me was siblings, conversation with the kids. But I had a case in the congregation I was serving in Tarpon Springs, where the gentleman had a major heart failure, and he had basically, I believe, died, and they were able to resuscitate him, but there had already been brain damage done, and he was in intensive care. Well, they, as a family, really hadn't had a conversation. So if you don't even, and I would think even if you had a conversation, in that moment when you're with your father in the intensive care unit, and you're seeing that person you love in that situation, you want everything to be done to maintain that life. Now, we had advanced directives, which you have to have, must have. I know you're going to cover that. But when you get into the personalities, that's a document. But when you get into the emotional side and the relationship the person has, the one daughter just could not let him go, just would not let him go. And the mother felt somewhat powerless to change her mind. Eventually, medical inability to prolong his life any longer answered the question, which is also a segue to say, I forget this, don't quote me on this, but I know I don't know the amount, but they say the highest time in our life when we spend on medical care is in the last, I think it's 3 weeks of our lives. So you have to have your conversation with yourself, your partner, your spouse, your children, very clear about what you want, and have that enforced that they will, their best of their ability, to carry that out. But also don't assume that the kids are all going to just be hunky-dory. So you have those kind of issues as realities, like we say, all the best laid plans somehow within that family dynamic and in the midst of grief and struggling with that.
You know, one of the things we talked about that we've each seen in our ministries is these wonderful, happy families, these great, gosh, I wish I could be part of that family. They really care about each other and love one another. And then Dad dies, and he always loved you better than me. And I get his cufflinks. And what's happening to the chess set? You don't even play chess. It's all the wrangling that suddenly happens in families, that things come out that you never expect. So when somebody says, oh, we don't have to worry about my family, our girls love each other, or all the kids are, we've had this conversation, everything's okay. Or here's this one, I don't have anything, so there's nothing to argue about. Well, we've seen families go asunder because who gets mom's recipes? See, you forget what you have. When we say, I don't have anything, don't think just finances. It's your teacup collection or your stamp collection. It's the little things that were you that your family is going to fight over. It doesn't have to be jewelry. It can be the most mundane crap, because and when those of us who have had this, they're fighting over what? Make copies, for God's sakes. Oh no, I want them in her handwriting. I don't want copies. I want to see the oil stain slicks on those recipes, because I know that Mom held them. So that's not an answer, is I don't have anything. And again, we have to do this for ourselves. We cannot do it for somebody else, as much as I'm telling you how to do this. I am such a control freak. I'm trying to control your life. But that is the reality, that we can only do it for ourselves, and hopefully if we do it for ourselves, we will model that for other members of there's one last thing, and that is, in my experience, when somebody is in ICU, when somebody is on their last legs and the decision needs to be made, whether it's organ donation or pull the plug or whatever that decision is, The sibling who lives the farthest away will be the one who will try to control the situation. Oh, you've experienced this. And that's because of guilt. I couldn't be there. I wasn't there when she was sick. I couldn't, and they will be the most obstreperous, is that a word? You don't do what you want to do. I want to make the decision because they haven't been able to make the decision. So another reason for, sorry, Joe, but all those decisions have been made. Mom and Dad made them. We're not making those decisions. I'm not making it. Susie's not making it. Bill's not making it. You're not making it. Mom and Dad made those decisions. And that can release the tension.
No one wants a repeat of the Terry Schiavo situation.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is such a good point. And I have used that example repeatedly. And I did with Donna. I'm sorry, who was that? Terry Schiavo.
There was a case that took place in Florida here where a husband had clear understanding that she did not want to be on life support. And who was the?
Her parents.
Her parents, I'm sorry, her parents. And it was a major court battle.
Yeah.
I was the nurse manager at the hospice house during those times where Terry was living, and every day for however many months she was there before we were finally able to resolve the situation and move her to work and plan for her to be removed from life support was just what you're saying. The family, the daughter and the sister and brother were there, and the mother and father, and then the husband who was on his own. And it was a battle every single day.
Yeah.
She was only 27 years old.
Yeah.
Another point about making these decisions
Early.
early. It's never too early to make them get them in writing.
Yeah, the parents and the siblings were convinced that she was responding.
Yeah.
And the medical community had said she's brain dead, and there was nothing there. But they saw it. She looked at me, whatever. And so they didn't want to take her off life support. When she finally died and they did an autopsy, they found that her brain had shrunk to the size of an orange. So they had been wrong. She had been brain dead for a very long time.
Said that they had had discussions, but the family didn't believe that.
Yeah.
It's a heartbreaker for everybody, and we had picketers out in front of the
Oh, yeah.
hospice house for months.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And where Beth Ann's mother lived in Dunedin here, the attorney, George Philos, was her next door neighbor, and he had to go live somewhere else during all of this.
Hotels all over because his life was threatened.
So that's how terribly complicated and, became a national issue about life and death issues, which now leads us to be able to have a place to say, that needs to you need to be serious about this, that you make those decisions. I want to get back to the thing about stuff. One of my experiences is with family members after someone has died about, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And so I don't know if some people I know were born to be keepers and some were born to be throwers. And but I think that the best you can do to reduce the stuff, if you have that time, is extremely important because you're just leaving that for somebody else. And again, as I think we've said before, is that if the things that you don't speak to and direct now, somebody else is going to take care of those for you one way or the other. All right, and you don't want it to be the state. And I know they're going to get into that in terms of legal issues. We're not lawyers, but we just sound like ones on stage. But we've seen these kind of experiences. The other piece I wanted to bring up too is remembering a case with beneficiaries on your checking account. You were talking about Truist. This happened to be Wells Fargo Bank, where this woman had all the documents, but her name was not on the beneficiary for the checking account. And it didn't matter what power she had otherwise, they wouldn't give, it wasn't that much money, but it was just the principle of it. And they wouldn't, it's their money, they took their money. It wasn't worth going to court about for the costs that would have incurred. So you have to remember, and I think I noticed on our account, we're getting notices about that to make sure every year that you make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. I was just looking at our will recently because it needs to be updated. Just some of the minor information that's changed, we need to do that again and have that brought into order. So that's one thing certainly to, if you can, downsize.
Della and I have a wife named Della, you've never met her. She doesn't darken the doorstep of any church, and I'm a pastor.
It's like our kids.
Yeah. Oh, my kids, yeah. Just last night, we were talking with friends, and we were talking about someone who had passed away. And Della said to our friends, my gosh, she said, I would be panicked if Nancy woke up dead tomorrow morning. You know, if I rolled over and Nancy woke up dead, she said, I wouldn't know who to call. I wouldn't know what to do. I would be so panicked. I wouldn't know who to call. And I turned to her and said immediately, you call someone to be with you. You don't make a decision. You don't call anybody. You don't call 911 or if I'm dead, you know, none of that. Just call someone to be with you, and then you make decisions from there. And that's an important point. Is it's not when these things happen, our first response is what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And in many cases, what you need to do is just sit down and stop and just let it hit you for a little bit and get somebody to be with you. And then you can sort it out together. And you'll feel safer in that response.
One of the wonderful pieces about hospice, and I know you're going to talk about that in weeks to come, if you're under their care, those kind of times are built into their whole practice. And so that you don't rush to do anything. It's okay just to sit for a while. And you're like you're saying, that's wonderful. I'm sure that, hopefully that's going to be included. Yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah, another thing about hospice is don't wait.
Oh, God.
Don't wait until the 3 days before they're going to die. You don't have to wait. And again, they'll be getting into that, I'm sure, next week. My dad was on hospice for 14 months. So they evaluate, but it's so helpful. They're so helpful in the majority of cases. I have heard of horror stories. There are in any profession, but it's just so helpful all along the whole journey. The other thing I wanted to kind of get back to, conversation starters. How do you have the conversation? How do you start a conversation? And oftentimes you can take a lead from the person themselves. They might say something that triggers the conversation, and so you can carry that on rather than shy away from it. And asking the question, well, what do you think happens? You know, if a friend has died, and it can just be a trigger, an opportunity to say, what do you think happens? And then you get to share is through movies. If you're watching a movie and there's a death, you know, or television shows, or poetry. If you have it on the top of your mind, it can be an opportunity to get into the conversation and begin the sharing about what do you think? And then, oh, I heard about this. I got this red book. Look at this. Look at all this stuff. Have you ever considered anything like this? Or You know, I heard about a MOLST form. Do you have one? You know, things like that. That is part of the advanced directives, and it will tell, particularly, it's very helpful for emergency medical technicians, EMTs, or doctors, and it will tell them if you want to be, how much you want the doctors and nurses to do to keep you alive.
So is that an acronym or?
Yes, it is, and I can't tell you what. You'll find out.
I wrote it down. We'll get back to everybody about it.
If they have it, yeah, they have it in Florida. It's usually a bright red, usually a bright fluorescent pink color, and they say keep it on your refrigerator so that if you're having a heart attack,
DNR.
DNR, yeah.
Yeah.
Someone else is going to have to answer next week.
But that's a great question, we'll make sure we'll.
Yeah.
And just,
Because it is different.
an FYI, my understanding is you call these, even if you have DNR tattooed on your chest, they will save your life. They'll break every rib you got trying to get your heart started. But if you call 911 for yourself or someone else, and you know that if that person's on their last legs and you know that they only had hours to live anyway, and in a panic you call 911, they will start that person's heart if they can, and they will put that person on life support. And then
If they don't have the form,
even
Even
if
with
they
the form?
have the form, and then it's one
they're not
hell of a
supposed to.
problem to get it taken off, because you're working from the opposite direction. That's why you get into hospice. Florida is different
Yeah.
than
it's,
other states. They can override, unfortunately.
There's online, there's a Florida Advanced Directive website with all the forms, with all the information, with the definitions of living will versus advanced. I will make sure that you all have the link for it, but it's very helpful, but it's Florida specific. And that's something that if you live in different places, you need to make sure you understand the rules, the laws in your state, or where you are.
And in Florida, you need the form, you have to have a specific color of form. It has to be the original form. You can't just have your attorney or you write up, I don't want to be, and sign and notarized. That means nothing. Nothing.
DNR is yellow here,
It's yellow, yeah. It's a,
and it has to be on the refrigerator, because EMTs know to look at the refrigerator.
So you're saying, I'm a Massachusetts resident. You're saying if I die in Florida, I have to abide by Florida rules?
yes,
Yes.
yes, yes,
That's
And
scary.
again,
That's truly scary.
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but this is why this is important, because you need to be aware.
You just need to move to Florida and stay here, Peter.
Well, and the other reality is if you have a will and it's drawn up in Wisconsin or somewhere else, that will may not be valid in Florida.
Right.
Another piece too is that when I don't know about presently, I don't have a form in front of me, but I have some congregants who feel like that's telling people, just let me die. But you have choices on there for levels of care.
Right.
So it's just not one or the other. There's levels of care that you do want them to administer certain elements of care and then not others. So, again, you're going to go over, I assume that's going to be a document that
Yeah.
you're going to go over? Okay,
Hospice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hospice is really important. Should we ask for questions?
I just had one other thing I wanted to share. A couple of things, really. One is about the pastoral issues I dealt with in terms of somebody thinking, well, I know I'm moving into the later stages. Do I move back where the kids are? And I can tell you right now, that's what it is. I've had people where it's worked great, but we have a friend who moved from here, from Florida up to Pennsylvania, to be near the kids. She has just moved back and she's back here. So, you know, it may work in some situations, but if your kids are active, you're going to have more of a, hopefully, you're going to have more body of relationships and friendships and activities, and people care about you, hopefully, to hear in the place where you are, than thinking that moving's, and okay, the kids are, I'll just let the kids take care of me. Like I say, yeah. The other piece is, if I'd be remiss, I have a very close friend, a high school friend. We reconnected through Facebook, one nice things about Facebook. Anyhow, he had a heart and a liver transplant, and he is now, as you might imagine, a supreme advocate for organ donation. And don't say, oh, at my age, there's not an organ left to play. He thinks that everybody should, and it's on you can do it through your Florida license, a driver's license, but anyhow, it saved his life, and as he says, I think he's now 37 years old. Nice. So anyhow, it's an important thing. And I also had one member who she donated her body for science too, and it was with the University of Miami, but you can do it a lot of different places. And they take care of transport, they take care of the body, of your body, and then return if you're going to be, well, usually it's followed by cremation, but anyhow, that.
To piggyback on that, I had a parishioner whose husband donated his body to science. And I had never considered this until I talked with her, but she had nightmares. Because in her brain, he was being dissected every day. And after a year, they sent her his cremains. He was cremated, and she was sent the cremains. And it was at that point, she said, after a year, she said, I can finally let go. Wow. So when you do that, which Della and I both are going to have our bodies go to science, but consider the people you leave behind and how that affects them emotionally. And if you have someone who's rather fragile, and she was, it was horrible for her. She needed therapy because of it. Yeah.
I don't have a question, but this is a comment. It occurs to me that with the updating, you might have to do it pretty often. So I think what I'm going to do is take these questions and put them on my computer and fill it in then and date it. And then so next time I have to update it, I'll just change the few things that need to be updated and date it again. And keep printing them out and putting them in this red notebook. But at least I don't have to rewrite it all whenever it needs to be done.
Betty, how often do you update your stuff? Didn't you? Yeah, you had yours and it was all updated. You said you update yours.
Putting it together.
Okay. She had a list of her passwords and updated all the time.
Yes.
I just want to share a quick story on stuff. Probably 20 years before my parents died, the three of us kids who lived all over the country were together for Christmas one year. My mom said, we want to know what of our stuff do you want when we die? And she said, I don't want to know this because I want to know what's important to you now so I can appreciate the things you do. And so we made a list, and 20 years later, we all got the same. Of course, we didn't fight over it. We had an agreement that we were going to do it, which is not often the case. But it was a wonderful conversation for them to know what it was that we loved about their stuff and what we wanted.
And that's a good way
To start the conversation.
Yeah, that's great.
My in-laws invited members of the family to come, and they handed out dots. And they had the yellow dot was Bill, and a blue dot was Susie. And you went through the house, and you put a dot on the back of a picture, or whatever, or you wrote down Mom's emerald ring, yellow dot, and all of that was kept together, and that was one way to do it. Yes.
Just to follow up to stuff, my dad passed in one brother loves antiques, you know, he got all that, but I don't like stuff. I just, because it's an aggravation, and at least for me. So I'm trying to live very simply, and it feels good. So just, I'll share that.
I haven't moved often enough, so I've accumulated so much.
I don't like stuff.
So I do have a real quick question, if you don't mind. At the university, we do everything electronically, so you can take all the notes you want, but to be able to have some of these forms and some of these documents online for you to continue to use, would that be helpful?
Yes.
Okay. And things like the advanced directive links and stuff like that, if I can get these to you, make sure we have your email, okay? And we'll make an email list, I can do this, and that way we can even talk to each other too, so you can come up with something or find something. Is that okay? Is that good?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, just to piggyback on what you were saying, Lori, was just because if, for example, we cannot be here next week, and we know we're gonna miss a lot of stuff, a lot of
That's
info,
great, okay.
and so I want to have that. Or any actual paper, I do like the actual tangible paper too. I think that helps.
I killed tons of trees.
And I don't have a printer or anything right now, so
Yeah.
that does help me.
Okay, good.
Anyway,
Casey, is
thank
this on
you.
Facebook or?
Yeah, we're live right now.
And on YouTube too?
Yes.
So we can go back to it?
Yes.
Good thing I didn't use anybody's name.
I hope Donna doesn't watch.
We were going to open up for questions, and we've already got into that process. If anybody has a question? Mark?
I have a question. I have a hypothetical sister.
We have a hypothetical answer.
Oh, you do. She's my twin, actually, and she lives in Massachusetts. And twice in the last 5 years, I've tried to open the conversation. And twice she has said, I don't want to deal with this. And the last time when she said that, she said, I think you're just after my money. So that was door was slammed. And I was thinking of what you said, Nan, about, my needs versus hers. She doesn't have a partner or anyone that's gonna step in, so I know eventually it's gonna end up in my lap. I don't know how to open the conversation in a way that says, help me to help you. Because she just doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Any ideas?
You're not gonna like it.
I'm not gonna like it because I'm gonna have the sheriff at her door breaking the door down.
Yeah, the
I don't
reality,
like that.
the reality is, that she's living her own life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't like that.
Yeah, correct.
And you don't have any control issues either.
No control issues.
You've got 40 witnesses here, that, all for your own peace of mind and your own and here's the other reality, frankly, she could outlive you.
Yeah.
And so all of this angst might be for naught. You could live to be 100 and she'll live to be 101 day. Just to spite you. So, yeah.
She's 7 minutes older than I am.
Okay. So my advice, and maybe others have other, but my advice is take care of yourself and let it go.
And I don't know if there's anything you can do, prepare yourself for, if that happens, what will I do? If she's not going to be a part of that conversation, maybe one of them is resting in the idea that yes, it may be very difficult and time consuming and not something you need to carry, but you may need to have somebody who can then help you into that process if she won't open up. So that's all you can do at this point is take care of you.
Maybe start by telling her, hey, if something happens to me, this is what you need to do. Instead of trying
Reverse
to
psychology.
initially figure out what you need to do if something happens to her.
Casey, that's a really good suggestion, and I did actually put together a list of all the contacts, the lawyers and everything, and I sent it to her, because I thought she would want to know. And she was annoyed, it's a minor way of phrasing it, that she wasn't on the list. She lives 1,500 miles away, so I couldn't see how it was really gonna work out all that well, even if she had agreed to do anything. So, it's a great idea, Casey, I just haven't had any luck with that. Maybe I'll just send her my whole red book.
Just for your own information, I don't know if she would respond to this, but you might just ask her, do you have a lawyer? Or do you know, so that you have one name
Yeah, she does have a lawyer,
and you
and
know.
she has a will that was drawn up, with me as the executor, using the name I had when I was married before. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's why updating
But that's a place to start, just to, you know, if you know you can't get into the conversation with her, and it sounds like she has shut the door on that, at least you have that place to start.
That's a good.
And, you know, everybody, your names can be traced, that can all be traced. It's, you know, better when it's updated, but many times it's not. You'll be able to, the lawyer will be able.
I want to just say something about the stuff part, since I was pretty rough on that. There are other occasions with family members that I've realized that going through the stuff was a healing process in part two. It can get overwhelming, and if there's not a good relationship between the siblings, not so good. But it also, you don't want to be a downer about everything. Sometimes going through all of that brings back lots of stories. I think even Mike shared that with his family. And so that's important. Yeah, there's been a couple of hands.
To that point, that's very true. That was one of the things I struggled with, because we're going through things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, they saved this. I mean, I had report cards that my mom had saved. It's crazy.
Yeah.
How they had actually saved, but then my brother's like, okay, Tom, we've got to get this done. You know, we're selling the house, so keep working. So, but yeah, I agree with that.
There was a question back here.
My mother died many, many years ago, and for the last 6 months of her life, she was abusing it, and it was obvious that she was going to predecease my father. My father was like your sister Marge, didn't want to talk about anything, just didn't. And my poor mother had tried for years to get him to do pre-planning, go ahead and buy a plot, or however they wanted to bury it. Nothing, he wasn't going to do it. So so I'm sitting here going, what am I supposed to do? My experience was I went to the person who wanted to talk about it. And we went through everything. In this case, it was going to be easier in the sense that because she was obviously going to predecease my dad, everything would go to him. But I typed it up. We did a checklist. She reviewed it. We got everything right. This is good. And when she died, within the 6 months, I just checked everything off. And yes, it was last minute. My dad had to, go to the funeral home and do all that at the last minute. And both my mother and I knew that's what he's going to do. So, but there were things that she wanted, and I could input to him. And so my experience was I went to the person who would be open to the conversation. And because my dad wasn't.
We have one more question here.
Yeah, you said this is on Facebook. If I would like my sister to watch it, she lives in Lakeland, she won't be coming over here, so
on Facebook. You just go to the Faith UCC page,
Okay.
and you just find the video. It should still be there later.
Oh, okay, good.
And then just share it, send it to her.
Okay, thank you.
Peter?
Okay, one more, Peter.
I think this red book, I think is an incredible idea, and thank you so much for it. There's one suggestion I would add to it, and that's writing your own obituary. In my case, I just didn't want anybody saying you passed away. I didn't pass, I died.
Well, Pastor Mike, it's part of our presentation, and that'll be part of today's discussion as well. That'll be in our third session, so we will cover that.
Yeah, we didn't get into funerals because Mike's gonna cover that. I could talk to you on the side if you'd like to talk about that.
I hope you got something from this. We have this amazing team, and there was so much information, like Marge said. We kind of tried to give you some jumping off points, some places for you to start thinking, your homework for this week. But, yeah, like how you will be tested. But, thank you all. If you have questions, write them down, write them next week, that's the homework. You know, and know that a lot of this legal, information will be talked about next week, so please come with questions. Let us know if you want, you know, more information about something we've been taking notice to. And let's make sure we have all of y'all's emails. I think I can find everybody on the directory, but this way we'll be able to share information.
Just notice that the size of the notebook is 1.5 inches. So if you're telling anyone, go get a notebook, don't get an inch, because if you should end up being power of attorney, an executor, you will have more